Yes.
Yep.
Okay, great. So this is Joe Garfunkel. I'm our Houston chapter leader of Citizens Climate Lobby, and this is our monthly meeting. We do have several new folks on the call, and so thank you everybody for joining. We have our monthly meeting every second Saturday of the month. Occasionally, we have to reschedule the meeting if there's a conflict, for example, with our national conference and so on. But typically, we will always have our monthly meeting the second Saturday of each month. And as we're doing today, this is actually a hybrid meeting. That means we have some remote folks that have joined through Zoom. And we also have several in-person folks that have joined at the Emerson Church. Dory, do you want to just put in a plug for the church and anything you want to share about that?
Sure, and Mark is joining us now with donuts. The Emerson Unitarian Universalist Church about 3 years ago endorsed Citizens Climate Lobby's work on putting a price of carbon and a dividend back to citizens. And so we're proud of that, and we're happy to host.
Okay, thank you, Dory. And so for today's agenda, we always go through our welcome, and we've had a separate intro. We spent about 15 minutes talking with some of the newer folks and getting to know them, and that was really fun. And then our main event for today, we're going to be talking about the summary highlights, specifically of the new climate provisions that were included in what's called the Inflation Reduction Act, also known as the IRA of 2022. That was a major landmark milestone legislation that was passed earlier this year in Congress through the House and the Senate, and signed off by our president. And it's just a tremendous bill. There are many people that still don't know a whole lot about it or what's included or why it's good for the climate. So we're going to talk about that. Then we'll go through our monthly calling campaign, where every month we take time to call our elected representatives, and Mark will lead us through that. Then we have our miscellaneous topics we'll go through, some status reports from our 5 levers, breakout sessions if time permitting, and then meeting wrap up. So on this slide, I just wanted to point out, I know that because we have in-person folks, it's hard for them to participate on computers or so on. But for those that are in person that have a phone, at least, you can scan this QR code. I highly recommend that you do that now. And by doing that, that'll bring up the slide deck on your phone, your mobile device, and you'll have access to all the web links that we see here. And for those that are in front of your computer, you can do that as well, or we have the bit.ly short link for our slide deck. We always have a lot of web links, and it's good to have that as reference. So I'm going to stay on this slide here for a few minutes so everybody has an opportunity to either look at the web link or get the QR code from your phone.
Put it in chat.
Has everybody had a chance to get that?
Good on this end.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on then. And so again, we'll go ahead and start our presentation now. And so Dory, we have a lot of presenters here. I'm not sure exactly what order people are going to go, but we're ready to start.
All right, Mark knows the order, and Mark, I believe, begins. And I'll turn the light back on. I think you could talk from there, and I think you'll be heard.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. And we're going to go over the Inflation Reduction Act climate provisions. So as most of you may know, this was passed in August of this year, just barely, by the tie-breaking vote in the Senate. So all the Republicans, unfortunately, voted against it. So there's a lot of bad blood going on about that, but hopefully they'll get over it. So the main takeaway from that for us is that it's supposed to reduce carbon dioxide emissions 40% from 2005 levels by the year 2030. And as you may know, our United States goal for reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 is 50% reduction. So with this act, we'll get close, but still 10% short of that. And just to note, if we just continue with our current policies, we would have a 27% reduction in carbon dioxide emissions by 2030. So quite a bit of difference with the climate provisions of this act. So we're going to go over some of the main parts of the act that result in the CO2 emissions. And I think maybe the next slide.
And who's doing this slide, the oil, gas, and leases?
So in order to get this passed, I believe it was Senator Manchin that insisted on this part of the act that there has to be oil and gas onshore and offshore leases equal to the leases for solar and wind projects. So this sounds,
Quite logical.
I'm sorry.
Quite logical.
I was going to say discouraging too. But according to the Citizens Climate Lobby, the emission cuts from the provisions in this act will be a lot more. Natural Resources Defense Council estimated 10 times more than the increase in emissions from the oil and gas production that's supported in this part of the act, continuing the leases. Next slide.
Yep. Sorry.
Yeah, I think this is you.
Okay, good. All right. So if you guys know me at all, I am addicted to all things renewable and all things solar. And so we are pleased that what had been, and this part is bipartisan, the federal income tax credit that is awarded to solar projects has passed more, has had more bipartisan support. It was dropping to 26% this year, but with the IRA change, it jumped back up to 30% for 10 years. And that means that if you install a system, if you invest in a solar project, solar and solar with batteries and even batteries alone, and you say spend $20,000 on it, when you do your taxes for the year it got installed, you can get a rebate, an investment tax credit, a credit of 30%. So that helps. It helps bring down the cost. It helps bring the simple payback back to 10 to 13 year payback, which is nice. The panels last for 25, 30 years. They're warranted for 25. They keep on ticking. So it's a good investment, long-term investment in hedging against rising electric prices if you can make your own power from your home. So all that's good, and happy to talk about solar and anytime. What's extra good with the IRA plan is that nonprofits now, it used to be you had to have a tax liability, right, to be able to take that 30% tax credit. Now nonprofits can take advantage, like this church, hopefully next year sometime we'll have solar, can take advantage of the non-residential tax credit. And I work part-time, so full disclosure, I thought the ITC was an upfront subsidy rather than a, right. So I'm sorry, so it's a direct pay option if you're a nonprofit. So if you're doing your taxes, if you're a residential person, it is a credit when you do your taxes. But if you are a nonprofit, it is a direct pay option. You don't have to wait to do, they don't do taxes. Nonprofits don't do taxes. So, so that's really good news. And we're each supposed to talk for a short period of time, so I'm not going to go into detail, but I work part-time, full disclosure, for a nonprofit called Solar United Neighbors. And there you go. And they have a wonderful, this is what Joe said about all the links that you're going to get in the slide presentation. They have great web landing pages for this IRA, effect of the IRS, because that we want to see solar reach more and more people. So that's the good news on production and investment tax credits. And this is one of the bigger pieces, right? 36% is the goal to have an effect on our reduction in carbon. So I think that's all I put in here. I'm going to talk again later about household products. So Joe, next slide.
Okay, and one of our other folks, Judith Hyatt, put this slide together about tax credits for electric vehicle purchases, but she's not able to attend, so I'm covering her slide, but she actually did the work putting this together. So basically, starting off the first bullet point, vehicles purchased before January 1st, 2023. So that's now, right now, what's happening. And so we're still in the same period from when the initial EV credit was available. The new law has not taken effect yet. And so under the current law, EVs purchased now are still subject to manufacturer sales caps. What that means is that for each individual manufacturer, let's just say Tesla as an example, once Tesla sold their first 200,000 cars, regardless of which model, just a grand total of 200,000, anyone purchasing a Tesla, their tax credit started phasing out. And this actually started happening specifically for Tesla at the end of 2018, quite a while ago. And I was lucky enough to get the full tax credit when I bought my Tesla in 2018 and took delivery. The second bullet point, once the new law takes effect, the second bullet point is still talking about the current law. And it's saying here that, again, people that are purchasing current vehicles this year between August and December, those vehicles must be assembled in the US. So that excludes any foreign manufacturers that are selling their cars in the US. And I'm not exactly sure which ones that would be. I guess, let's see, the Audi e-tron is one I know about. I guess there's Kia. I'm not sure who else is selling it, but I guess those are not eligible right now unless they are actually being assembled in the US. So the third bullet point, this is where starting in January 1st of next year, the sales caps per manufacturer are gone, but there are new requirements that take effect specifically related to the battery minerals that are used in the battery and other uses of minerals. Assembly and tax requirements apply. More details are available at this web link, which goes into pretty good detail about all of those requirements. And so the grand total of tax credits for EV purchase projected to reduce total emissions by 28%. Any feedback or other questions on EV purchases?
Question, the projected to reduce total emission, total of what, and 28% of what are we talking about
Like
here?
my solar and
Like your
solar was
solar.
36%. This is 28% of the projected, Mark, maybe you can say of the projected total that we're trying to, this IRA bill is trying to reduce our carbon by. They come in pieces of pie. So solar and renewable projects was 36%. This is 28%.
So
Right.
this is,
And if we go back to the beginning, right? So this says the very first in bold, IRA climate provisions will reduce CO2 emissions 40% from 2005 levels. So out of that 40%, the EV is 28% of the total from this.
28% or 28 out of the 40.
28
Right.
out of the 40.
Okay, I'm going to go on to the next slide. Fees for methane leakage.
Here it is, probably 100% when we do all of this.
So did you put my slides in?
They're following this.
Okay, well, let's go to the next slide. This is Andrew talking here. So first of all, a bit of background about why we care about methane. You know, it's not just a CO2 problem. Methane is the second largest source of greenhouse gas emissions, but a molecule of methane released now is about 80 times the warming potential of CO2. So, and if you do it on the accounting basis of 100-year equivalent, which is what the CO2 accounting does, it's still over 20 times. So it's really important not to just focus on CO2, but to do methane as well. The flip side, the good news of that is that methane degrades in the atmosphere over 20 years, half-life of 10. So reducing methane now sees we get the benefits early in the next 5, 10, 15 years, and it buys us more time to solve the CO2 problem. 3 top sources: oil and gas production and all the transportation pipelines, delivery systems, livestock farming, digestive systems, manure of cattle, sheep, goats, and seepage from municipal waste facilities and lives and landfills as the organic matter seeps through. This bill only focuses on the oil and gas systems part. It leaves out, as far as I know, the other top sources of methane. Next slide. Next slide. So data is important. The EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, puts together an inventory of methane emissions from the oil and gas systems. And so you can see it's fragmented right across the value chain. We have different operational activities, different pieces of equipment, valves, compressors, different activities. So it's not a one fix for this. It's lots of fixes in lots of different places. And part of the issue is that many of these leaks are not, they're not continuous, they're episodic based on changes in pressure, specific things you do in the system. And so continuous monitoring, you know, or episodic monitoring doesn't catch everything. The other thing I would say is that there are lots of independent studies which come up with different numbers from the EPA inventory. So measurement is really important. Improved measurement and improved data has to be the starting point to allow us to target the highest priority items. Next slide. So I think then we go to what's in the bill. And the first item really talks to that first, that concern about upgrading our measurement and detection systems. There's a chunk of money, $1.5 billion, to you know, blanketly enable methane emission reduction activities. But that includes detection, on-site sensing by infrared cameras, flyovers, drones, satellites. That's going into that. And so that's going to make our ability to get our arms around the problem much better. And I'll say also that in the private sector, we can see a pipeline of about 600 million to be spent on this over the next 2 years. This $1.5 billion is over the lifetime of the bill, which is 12 years. There's a lot of money going into this, which is a good thing. The first time we have a charge on a greenhouse gas at the national level. And so that's starting in 2024, rationing up over 2 years by 2026. Those are per tons of methane. So divide by 20, use 100-year equivalent to get the tax charge per CO2 equivalent, $75 a ton. That's pretty close to what's in the carbon capture provisions. And the main thing is here is it's not all emissions, it's to drive facilities into compliance with the methane rules. So that is the charge is the secondary impact of this. The main target is to drive facilities and operators into compliance. And you can kind of see this in the next couple of slides where my friend Bob Kleinberg put together a flow chart of how these things are calculated. Next slide.
Joe, next slide.
Next slide, Joe. And so here we see on the top ratcheting of the fee from no fee now up to $1,500 a ton. Then we see the 25,000 a ton qualifying facility provision. So if you're below that, you're not eligible. And then we get a kind of interesting thing. For the first year of operation, you can use the standard emission factors the EPA has for like what a valve should emit, what compressor should emit if it's a standard piece of equipment. In the next 2 years, we're supposed to use empirical data that is undefined. How will that data be collected? How will it be used? We don't know that yet, so that's a big uncertainty. And then we go to the next slide. If you're still over your exempt limits, then then there are some other steps you go through, basically allowing some get outs, if you like, but essentially
Does
driving.
this say fix your damn problems?
Yeah, you know, ultimately, if you don't fix the problems, those operators will be liable for the methane fee. So it's giving them plenty of opportunity to comply with the methane rules, which are the main objective of this bill. So next slide. And so, you know, what should be celebrated is that the major milestone of it's the first time we have a national level direct fee on a greenhouse gas. So that's a big milestone. It's in line with CCL's objectives. As I said, the primary mechanism is not the tax, though, it's driving compliance. So it's getting to the same end, but maybe a bit more indirectly. And maybe the direct fee is a more efficient way of doing that, rather than having this stacked scheme of compliance, then compliance, non-compliance fee. It's a little bit more messy, I would say. You know, there were some numbers put out for the reduction potential. I went underneath those. I tried to verify. I went back to the sources. They're not unverifiable. So I'm not prepared to say what the tonnage, what the emissions reduction will be. All I know is that this is a significant change. They will be material, but don't hang your hat on the numbers that were put out in the report. I don't believe anybody has analyzed that stacked system of fee plus mandate compliance. I don't think there's any analysis out there which really works out how much the emissions reduction will be from this.
Thank you, Andrew.
All right.
Next slide. Who's next?
All right, I'll do this one. There's also a provision in there for carbon capture and storage. So this is an extension of the 45Q tax credit for carbon dioxide captured and stored either geologically or via utilization. So the 45Q tax credit goes back to 2008 when that began. And you see the fees up there, or actually the tax credits, sorry about that. And according to Citizens Climate Lobby, that should reduce total emissions by 13%, the total of that 40% reduction. I believe that's it on that slide.
Mark, just one question. I thought the 45Q tax credits were actually going to increase under the IRA over time. Am I mistaken on that?
I didn't see that.
Yeah, that was my understanding too.
Yeah, I think they're going to increase to something like $80 or $90 a ton.
Yeah, 85 is what I remembered.
Okay, yeah. Anyhow, maybe I need to go look at it too, but you might want to look at that.
Yeah,
That would be in line with the methane thing. Yes, it sounds like.
And I think that's very important because that, you know, that's getting pretty close to the $100 a ton. And that's kind of the number that gets thrown around a lot by these major companies in terms of what would really incentivize them to put in carbon capture on a big commercial scale. So that's, to me, that's kind of what's exciting about that.
yeah, thanks for that comment. Yeah, I don't know if Cord is here. She's not-
I'm on.
Yeah,
Okay.
Court's here, and Bill has his hand raised, or is that an old?
Yeah, no, I had a question for Andrew.
Sure.
Great talk on the methane side. I didn't know all of that. Team Oil has written a paper on methane emissions from the industry. And I don't know if you've seen that, but I can get you a copy of that or get you a link to that if you're interested.
Bill, I have seen that, and I've actually started work on preparing versions of that which can be rolled out to other audiences. So that's the talk I'm doing this evening, is inspired by that methane paper, which was very good.
Yeah, and Team Oil will probably be interested in your report on the impact of the IRA on methane.
Yeah, I attend Team Oil meetings when I can.
Great, okay, thanks.
Bill, while there's this pause, I went down and let in Mickey from the Woodlands, so she's going to be joining us. I don't know if you recognize her, but we have Woodlands representation here at Emerson. Okay, carrying on.
Yeah, and this is Court.
All right. So another part of the IRA, it revolves funds and grants incorporating into removing emissions through natural processes. So living organisms, such as forest and how we maintain our crops. And so these efforts are projected to reduce emissions by 10%. And this part of the funding helps to fund different conservation programs, specifically within the USDA, NRCS, and the Forest Service. There's also opportunities for grants for urban and community forestry and conservation programs, as well as funding climate smart practices such as cover cropping, using cover crops to help further enrich the soil, allow for a good, healthy ecosystem in the soil, which helps crops and the crops yields, and also incorporating more climate friendly practices for farming, such as silviculture, which incorporates trees, or silvopastures, incorporates trees into pasture farming. And also to note, with with cleaner air because of ozone emissions, there's projected increase of crop yields within themselves to also support just the overall net income that foresters and farmers can produce because of the cleaner air within the provisions of all that's been discussed so far. Oh, and what I did want to plug is later we're going to learn a little bit more about what we can do in our community to help essentially by planting trees, which is one of the efforts Citizens Climate Lobby is now also on top of carbon pricing, being very aware of what we plant. Native plants, grasses, forbs, and trees are very important for this initial removal process. So look later in our slide deck, we'll be discussing an opportunity to be a part of those efforts with a different organization. Thank you.
Next slide. Oh, this is me. This slide is busy, and it's too busy to really expect anybody to take it all in. But it's just exciting that even though this is only 5%, so this is a smaller piece of the reduction pie, it is something we all can do at home, at our level. We can, and I put my glasses on, but we can, you know, we've already talked about electric vehicles. We've already talked about solar. You could do geothermal with this. You can put in batteries even without solar. If you already had solar and you just want to put in batteries, there's incentives for that. If you need to upgrade your electric panel because you're putting in more electric appliances, if you do basic weatherization, heat pump water, hot water heater, or heat pump air conditioner heater, these are all incentives available to homeowners. And CCL USA has made it very convenient to figure out, calculate what you might be able to save. And so that's just a link to help you get inspired to take these measures. And I'll share that weatherization not only saves you money, but it makes you more comfortable in your home. You feel less stressed, you feel less, and the air conditioning is not running as often. And so all good. And then I took the liberty of putting a few more slides in here because I was inspired by the CCL put together a whole slide deck. So if you guys got inspired to say, "Ooh, I want to present this to my school," like we have some high school students here, and check out their whole slide deck. But I picked some slides from it. So Joe, next slide.
Before I go to the next slide, Dory, I want to point out one item I noticed in the table listing on the right, if I could. I was looking
Yeah.
specifically at the heat pump, air conditioner heater listing. And I noticed it's listed a couple of times. First of all, you get the heat pump tax credit of 2,000 starting next year. And then at the very bottom, you get a heat pump air conditioner upfront discount of 8,000. So if I'm doing the math correct, that looks like a total of 10,000 you're getting back.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah,
pretty
now's the
large.
time. If your AC unit is on the brink, or even if it's not, you want to just save money.
Exactly. Okay, next slide.
So this is the next series of 3 slides. When I saw this slide, even though in 2020 there's a bump up, like wrong direction, guys. When you look at the average overall, it is trending down, which is helpful, right? That made me happy. So then the next slide is, okay, if we do business as usual, we're missing our Paris target. Darn, right? That's no good. And however, if we all take this IRA and do the work that it's encouraging us to do, then next slide. Ta-da! It's going to be hard, but there's hope. So I think those were the slides that I put in. Okay. Next slide, or any questions?
All right, and I'll just briefly comment, some of the deficiencies we've already talked, 10% short of our 50% reduction goal. And there's no carbon fee, and there's no mention of border adjustment.
So there is a methane fee, or
Yes, it's a greenhouse gas fee, yes.
So it is a start. When you say there's no carbon fee, how do you differentiate the two?
The CO2 tax, right?
Yeah, carbon dioxide. Yeah, that's what I meant. So anybody else want to point out a deficiency in this act?
I mean, I
So-
have several problems with this act. And I understand CCL's put itself out as a cheerleader for this. And I understand that because it's got lots of major impactful provisions, but there's also lots of shortcomings in the act. And I'm going to just mention 2. I've got about 5 that really concern me, but I'll just mention 2. One is that the majority of these provisions are supply side provisions. There's very little on the demand side, the energy efficiency and the how people use energy. There's so much low-hanging fruit on the use side that this bill doesn't get to. It's a shortage of ambition on how we use energy, and I think that supply side emphasis on the demand side needs to be balanced out a lot more if we're going to get near those targets. My second major concern is that the instrument the bill uses across the board is tax credits. And that is an instrument which basically builds out a lot of communities of interest around the tax credit mechanism. So people, developers, equipment suppliers, they build their business models around cash flow modeling, incorporating the tax credit. And their returns have that built in. So what you're doing, you're saying, this is my mechanism for supporting, climate, CO2 mitigation activities, but that makes it incrementally almost impossible to do an across-the-board carbon fee or carbon tax across all activities, because none of those communities of interest are going to give up their sector-specific tax credit for something which is broad-based.
Does it have to be given up?
Yes, it does. You can't put them alongside. It's totally distortionary. And that's been demonstrated in a number of economies.
But except the tax credits are on you talked about demand versus supply.
Yeah.
on the demand side, or, when I think of solar tax credits, it's because I want to reduce and those are reductions in my usage
Yes.
and so I still support, and I don't see how it's a conflict to put a price on carbon at the origin, at the supply.
The tax credit goes to the, in most of these, it goes to the project developer. So the end user gets it indirectly through, basically improved availability of projects from the developer because they come into the economic envelope. And that drives activity, which may be a different and more costly and longer ramp of activity than you get if you apply across the board carbon fee or carbon tax. So, for me, it's putting a major impediment in the absolute goal of getting as much activity under the regime of a carbon tax. I think it makes it much more difficult to get there. And so I applaud the fact that big climate provisions have gone through, but I think the mechanism is going to come back and bite us because we won't get to the most effective solution.
All right, thank you. And
That's my soapbox.
that's it. And then Joe, Andrew, I'll just add that we'll do a little competition. Let's go for it. Let's try and make it work because this is a first step and we've been waiting at CCL for how long to get some price on carbon, to get some movement.
Yeah,
So,
I agree. That's why we're cheerleading.
right, so we're
But-
cheerleading
This
it,
is
but
this is an initial first step and it's a major milestone. But I would add that the goal, looking at the very first line there, the goal is still only 50% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions instead of a 100% reduction, right? So right away, the goal is still not correct, but it is a good first step.
and then John had a question, I think.
Why don't you go to post your analysis and concern on Nerd Corner and see what Jonathan Marshall and the other researchers, I'd like to see,
Sure.
I'd like to see that analyzed. Those are the guys who will have the response for it.
Yeah, no, I think it's up for debate, and the more we talk about it, the better it'll be.
Yeah, we just,
We do have these take off the rose tinted glasses that we're still showing.
Right.
Okay. Is this your?
Yeah, so if if you haven't already looked at this on the CCL community website, there's a training for learning about the Inflation Reduction Act, and there's also an article that covers a summary of what we went over too.
Okay, and then Q&A. So I have a question, Andrew, really for you under your methane presentation, and that was an excellent presentation. Thank you. I've just been reading in the past week some recent news about additional satellite resources that are now really able to pinpoint and recognize where the largest emissions are coming from, specifically, for example, in Texas, in the Permian Basin and other locations.
Yeah.
But I was saying that, for example, in the map that was being shown in this news article, it's even able to pinpoint, like for example, the 10 highest emissions coming directly from the city of Houston, different plants and facilities. But that gets back to, monitoring and measuring the amount of emissions, and I'm still not really clear. The measuring seems like such a fuzzy area. Are there really going to be any penalties if we can't definitively prove what the leakage amounts are?
Well, this is a big question mark. When we phase in to use what they call empirical data in the Act in 2024, that is undefined. So we don't know the data standards that will be applied there. And yes, the expectation is that sensoring detection technology will be more widely deployed. It is getting better. And by that time, the expectation or the hope is that we'll be able to be much more confident in the measurements we make. Now, I think satellites are great, and they allow you to have the first look at finding out where the big emission sources come from and when, because a lot of them are episodic. But then you have to go in on the ground and find the particular valves, the particular compressors, the particular pieces of kit that responsible. So, it's a combination of aerial data, takes you close to where you need to be, but then I need to go in with either infrared sensing on the ground or engineering visits to pin it down. But it does, what is helpful is that it allows you to prioritize the most serious cases first, and then work on those like in a priority list.
Thank you, Andrew. Any other questions from anybody? We have a couple things in the chat. I haven't looked to see what's there. Let's see, from JT, was that the IRA also set at an $85 a ton, as I recall, carbon price for 45Q credits. I think we covered that. Second point, Hyundai Kia are planning to build a US plant to qualify for the New Deal. Excellent points, Jim. Anybody else? Any other questions? There must be lots of questions.
Or we did such a good job, or we overwhelmed them. One or the other.
When does the credit start for installing an electric stove? Because I already installed one.
Kristen, say it again, what you just said?
When I installed an electric stove instead of my gas stove, so I was wondering when the credit starts for the home improvement.
I think it's beginning to, for heat pumps, for solar, it bumped back up this year, but for heat pumps and those, I think it's beginning of 2023.
Okay.
So, and for those who don't want to put in a whole new, well, we talked about this at our last meeting, right? The induction stovetop 2-burner is a portable. You can plug it in, you can put it on top of your existing stove and get all the benefits better than electric stovetop. Okay.
Yeah, actually, I love our induction cooktop. It boils water faster than the gas did. That's amazing.
Yes, you could induction stovetop. Excellent.
So I'll go ahead. There's definitely one more question that I can think of. And like, what about everything else that's still needed to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions? And so part of the answer to that is going to come later in the slide, where we're going to cover a topic about the upcoming December CCL National Conference. And so some of those questions are going to be answered there when we get to that slide. But before we go on, any other questions from anybody?
Mark?
Yeah, just a little bit more information on that electric vehicle tax credit. So I think it's 7,500 tax credit on a new vehicle, and there's a limit on how much the vehicle can cost, but it's pretty high. And then you can also get that for a used vehicle. So that's $4,000 tax credit on a used electric vehicle. And of course, there's a cap on that of $25,000 price on the used vehicle.
Thank you.
Mark, one question on the, I know there was some funds for infrastructure for building out an electric charging grid, at least starting to build out an electric charging grid for EVs in the infrastructure bill. Were there any additional aspects of the IRA that address the charging infrastructure?
Yes, I can't speak to them, but yes.
But some of that's in the original big infrastructure bill.
Well, I know there was some, I remember, yeah, I know there are funds in the original infrastructure bill. I don't recall whether there was anything more to, but it seems to me, I mean, you read, you read that, fount of all knowledge, Facebook, and it seems that, and even in my personal situation, the concerns about charging seems to be the biggest hurdle for a lot of consumers to make the plunge to an EV.
So
Mark,
yeah,
I
I
didn't
can just
come
add
across-
to that. I can add to that a little bit. I mean, having installed my own home charger, and Dory, you have, I know, and other folks have. The actual charging appliance, for example, I bought the Tesla home charger appliance, which was roughly about $500 when I bought it. And that's not a huge amount of money compared to the gas savings you're going to end up with. But in addition to buying the appliance, you have electrical wiring and electrical installation, which can really add up. And that's going to vary on a home by home basis. depending on where your breaker box is compared to where your garage is. Is it right in your garage? Is it on the opposite side of the house, and so on? But beyond that, one of the biggest issues in regard to charging is for those folks who want to have an EV that don't own a home. And then you're kind of stuck, right? What do you do about charging when you're living in an apartment? And so there's a lot of new solutions coming out that I've seen. There are some pilot projects now where in a certain number of cities, they're installing chargers, they're attaching them to light poles, electric light poles, to make them more publicly available in certain neighborhoods. And so there's a lot of things going on in that area.
And John Patrick has his hand raised, Joe. I wanted to let you know.
Yeah, go ahead. I can't see, I'm sharing the slide, so
Yep.
go ahead.
Thank you. And thank you to all the presenters too. It was highly informative. So I guess my question is around, I'm fully aware that IRA is like, it's on the federal level, right? But seeing it, we are looking at, or I believe we're looking at kind of what the communities can do and what local councils, even at the state level, can do. I mean, how does this connect? How can we connect this IRA bill with actions that can be done more locally?
So in the city of Houston, has its own climate action plan, just as an example, and that's underway. But how the two connect to each other, that's a really good question, and I don't know.
Well, and I can share that Solar United Neighbors is about to, this coming week or the next, announce a new group purchasing effort with the city of Houston to kick more solar on homes. So that's one step, is working with the municipality to get the word out about these increased incentives. And yeah, so that's one I can share.
Yeah, there is one team that I'm part of. I take no credit for it, but I'm on a team that Susan Adams is running. This started out as a John Cornyn lobby team, but it's kind of morphing into a Texas lobby team. And there are plans to actually have a first ever, if you will, lobby day with the Texas legislature, I think in March, sometime early next year. I forgot the date.
We have a
Bill, you may
slide on that
remember.
coming up as well. We'll see
Yeah,
those
and
on that.
that, I think the main item we're going to be lobbying for is to improve the transmission capability from West Texas to the population center so we can take more advantage of wind power.
Right.
But that is kind of the early stirrings of a Texas state lobbying effort, and we'll see how that goes. I don't know how that's going to develop and how effective that'll be, but there are people thinking about that and talking about that, and there's at least something going to happen in the next several months.
Right. That's a good point, Hans. Thank you for bringing
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, we should probably move on pretty soon, so we have time for the other items. Any last questions before we move on? Maybe one more question if there is one.
No more hand raised.
Okay, I'm going to move on then. My slide is not moving. Here we are. And we're up to our monthly calling campaign. Mark, if you can lead us through that.
Okay. So once a month, we do encourage all our members to call both senators and your congressional representative. And so if you want to sign up for a monthly reminder, that's the first under the monthly calling campaign on the slide there. And that's the address to find that. The second, calling any time, that link, you can access that and it will ask you to put in your zip code and you call. I'm sorry, it'll bring up your senator's phone numbers and then also your representative. So I think at this point, if everybody has your phone, if you could go through those steps of calling your senators and representative, and there also is a script on that link that gives you an idea briefly what to say. And
Mark,
you'll
did you want to
probably
go?
get
Mark, did you want to go through the example before we ask our folks to start calling? We have a bunch of new folks on the call.
Sure.
And I'm going to add while he's getting ready that the reason we do this is the more of us that call, the more we mention that we care about the climate, the higher it gets on their agenda items. And it's like the Grand Canyon, one drop at a time, but we make big, big difference.
Yeah.
That's
And I
my-
wanted to mention that, you know, everybody is always a little bit nervous, calling for the first time. I know I was, everybody is. But this is a weekend. Nobody's going to answer when you call that number today. You're going to get an answering machine, which makes it really simple. You can read from the script and you're going to leave your message and you're going to hang up. And then on the website, you're going to place a check mark off that was done. So there's really no reason to be too nervous. You're not going to be speaking to anybody live. Okay, Mark, please go ahead.
Okay. So we have the two senators' local numbers, and those are usually not full, the voicemail. If you call the Washington number, it's more likely to be full. So I'm calling Senator Cornyn. I'm going to follow the script.
Thank you for calling the office of United States Senator John Cornyn. The office will be closed on Friday, November 11th in observance of Veterans Day. The office will reopen on Monday, November 14th at 8:30 a.m. Our regular office hours are Monday through Thursday, 8:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. and Fridays, 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. To leave a message for the senator or a member of the staff, please stay on the line.
Hello, Senator Cornyn. My name is Mark Harriman, and I live in Houston. I'm calling to urge you to support Fostering Overseas Rule of Law and Environmental Sound Trade Act, Forest Act SB 2950. This will increase efforts to protect and restore forests around the world and assist governments in working together to reverse and eventually eliminate illegal deforestation. Thank you for your support of this act. That's it.
And then you check the box or you say, I called.
Check the box, yeah. Yeah.
All right, so we'll go on mute here at this place, and then we'll come back on when people have done their calls.
If you, for anyone, if you need this web link, please make a note of it because I'm going to stop sharing in a minute here.
Yeah, we can see your screen.
Okay, great. So we're now into the section of the meeting where we go through some miscellaneous topics. And one of those items, especially for the new people that are joining us for the first time, immediately after this meeting finishes, that's at 12 noon Houston time, we have our Citizens Climate Lobby National Monthly Speaker, and that varies every month. And this month we have Sam Daly Harris from the organization called Civic Courage, where he's the founder of that. And so there in quotes, you can see, how do you empower citizens to effectively engage with their government to solve big problems? We talked this month to the person who literally wrote the book on this topic. He's the founder and CEO of Civic Courage, and he'll share some of the successes he's seen with the organizations he's coached, including Citizens Climate Lobby. So that should be a very interesting talk. And the web link to connect to that one is there at cclusa.org/meeting.
Sam Daly Harris also founded Results, which is the basis for CCL's positive, respectful lobbying approach. So he is key in CCL's DNA.
Excellent. Thank you, Bill, for that. I was not aware of that.
Yeah.
Something else coming up also later today, for those who have not seen this, we did put it in our monthly newsletter we sent out. There's a TEDx talk at Rice University. That's later today, starting at 5 p.m. And Andrew, who's on the call with us now, is one of the speakers there. He's going to be talking about the methane. Andrew, is that going to be the same presentation you gave us already, or something different?
No, it's completely different. but same topic, but a different presentation.
Okay. And then the two others that I've listed here also, Dr. Sylvia D and Dr. Daniel Cohan, in addition to Andrew, all three are members of our CCL Houston chapter. So that's it's quite amazing, and esteemed group of folks. And thank you, Andrew, for bringing that to my attention. I was not aware. That should be a very interesting discussion later this evening at Rice. Andrew, anything else you want to add about this?
No, there's get there early because the auditorium only seats about 120 people. So get there well before 5 o'clock. You know, it will go on. Every speaker has about 18 minutes. I'm not allowed, they don't allow us to really promote this organization. We're not allowed to say we're talking on behalf of CCL because they want it to be topic specific, not promoting an organization. So I will, in the sidelines, tell people that CCL inspired me to do this.
Thank you.
Quietly wear your CCL t-shirt.
And for those that are not faculty or students at Rice, this is actually a paid event. I believe the fee is $10 from anybody that would like to join, and the link is there in the slide deck.
And
Moving
they
on.
will make a YouTube, sorry, Joe, they will make a YouTube of the whole event. And so it will come up on YouTube sometime over the next couple of weeks.
Great. Once you get that link, could you send that to us, Andrew?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Okay, here's another interesting topic coming up, and this is what I had mentioned earlier. We have another Citizens Climate Lobby Climate Conference coming up in December. Typically, we do have the two conferences, one in the summer, one in the winter time. The date for this is December 3rd and 4th. It's a remote online event. The link is there. And so the point of this particular conference, the focus is on what do we do next as an organization? We talked about the Inflation Reduction Act. We see what's there. We see the deficiencies. It's an amazing start, but there's so much more work to do. And so the focus of our December conference is to talk specifically, what are we going to be focusing on next? And how do we get to that 100% goal of reducing greenhouse gases instead of only the 50%? So it should be really good. Hopefully everybody will register for that and will attend. I'm going to move on. And here is the topic that Hans was talking about earlier. We have a CCL Texas State Lobby Day event in person in Austin, scheduled March 27th through March 28th next year. And there's a link here to Susan Adams' email address for more information. There's still a lot of time between now and then, and so we'll be sharing more details as we get it. But if it's something that you're really interested in and have questions, please feel free to reach out directly to Susan Adams. She's the one that's organizing that. Hans, you know about this. Anything else that you would like to add?
No, I mean, I think that's kind of it. Like I say, I think the main substantial piece of legislation we'll probably be lobbying for is electricity transmission from west to east. But I think it'll be a really interesting experiment just to see how it goes logistically.
This will be
but no,
great.
I think you kind of covered it. It's very embryonic still, so I think it's still, you know, it'll form into something a little bit more concrete, I think, as the date approaches.
Sounds good. And I'd like to add that there already is some CCL lobbying already taking place even prior to this. Every month or every other month, Larry Howe has been organizing local CCL members in Austin to attend state committee hearings to testify on behalf of CCL, sharing anything related to climate and what we would like to see. And in addition to in-person appearances by a few volunteers already, many of us, I think in the last batch I saw there were 30 or 40 written testimonials submitted in writing to the Texas State Legislature website. I know that I participated in that, and I wrote a written testimony as well that I submitted. So there's a lot going on at the state level. I'm going to go on. And now we're up to our 5 levers status reports. And for those that are new, you may not really be up to speed on what these are, but we have our 5 levers are called, we have a lobby lever team, Grass Tops, Grassroots, Media, and Chapter Development. And so we'll hear from each of the leaders, except for Judith, who is not here with us today, about lobbying. Mark or
Joe,
Court, did you
can
want
I-
to, or go ahead, Dory?
Just gonna, because Andrew came up and wasn't sure after the elections or whether he'd gotten redistricted or, whatever. And I just quickly went to who represents me and was able to enter in his address and find out, exactly who, that he's still got Lizzie Fletcher as his representative. And so I just empower everybody to know who your representative is.
Who has Lizzie?
Andrew is
Andrew?
in. Yeah, I'm right now, and John is your liaison.
I'm the liaison.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
Connections, good.
So everybody that voted should know that also already, because, for example, I was previously in the district with Crenshaw, and but he's not who I voted for because I'm no longer in his district. And so I already know who my new legislature is. But everybody can just look at your Texas voter registration card to find out who your new representative will be, or at least what district you're in. Is there anything we want to add here, and with Judith not being here, anything else? We do have a new congressional district indicated on the chart here, Texas 38. And Wesley Hunt was the expected winner of that. He did win. Steve Haney, are you still on?
I am on.
Steve, you were very involved. We worked together on getting an email sent out about the Texas 38. Anything that you'd like to add?
No, just as you're pointing out, just start to raise our consciousness of Wesley Hunt, and he's got a very large swath of Northwest Harris County, and he fancies himself as the energy congressman of the world. So very interested in energy. He's producing a set of 8 videos about energy. I met with him very briefly in one of his meet and greets, not one-on-one, but and asked him, and his take on climate change was, well, it's China's term, we've done enough. At that time, that was before the primary. So his intentions were, focused on winning the primary. So I haven't had any experience with him since then. I'm hoping that with his interest in energy, he'll be taking an interest in climate change and in some and appropriate climate legislation. We did send him an email. I keep checking to see if he's ever responded to me. He has not, but I didn't really expect him to, hoping to just get some mind share going forward.
Exactly. And that Texas 38 district, for those that don't know, that was carved out of 3 previously existing districts. It came out of the Woodlands district where Brady previously was. It came partially out of Lizzie Fletcher's district, and it came partially out of Crenshaw's district. So portions of those 3 were carved out to create Texas 38, a pretty solid R district, and Wesley Hunt was the forecasted winner, and he did win that congressional district.
Yeah, I think he got some of the energy corridor in his district.
Yep, Lizzie Fletcher's district.
Yeah,
Okay,
Joe,
I'm good.
Joe, one
Yes.
piece of information, you may already know this, but just for everyone's information, Daniel Burns has agreed to act as liaison for Texas 38.
I was
And of
not
course-
aware. We were
Yeah.
looking for someone to lead that. And I was
Good.
not aware.
He's agreed to lead that. So for anybody on this call or anybody that's going to be in Texas 38, if they're interested in helping out with the lobby effort, Dan Burns would be the guy to contact.
Okay, thank you for
Great.
sharing that. We already have a few people interested in joining that Texas 38 lobby team. So I'll forward that info to Dan, and Dan will need to organize a meeting.
Good.
Thank you for sharing that. Okay, moving on. Court, Grass Tops.
Hey, so the grass top lever, for those individuals who are a bit newer, this is an effort to reach either organizations, businesses, very well-known individuals and ask them for endorsements and endorsing a price on carbon. And before we can, as Dory said at the very beginning, Emerson has given an endorsement for a price on carbon. And as an example, and so typically we build those relationships first by many of these other levers by having conversations, understanding where they're at, and understanding climate change and impacts in the community. And then slowly stepping that relationship towards an endorsement. And those endorsements can be used in our lobby meetings. Perhaps an individual would want to come to a lobby meeting and represent. That is another way to flex this lever. So currently, I'm slowly pursuing different businesses. I am very much open to understanding if there are particular businesses you have had an eye on. Perhaps they're acting in a sustainable way. Perhaps they've been a part of some part of the climate movement. And then an additional effort that was started a while back was trying to get a Texas-wide economists in academia to endorse a price on carbon, similar to what 2 other states have done. And I'm needing to pick that back up. And so the team who had started it with Joe's leadership have written an op-ed with the intention of publishing this op-ed and having the op-ed link saying, X many individuals, prominent academic individuals have endorsed the price on carbon. So I want to take this to like statewide. So I need to get my bearings a little bit straight to see if, I don't know, I think maybe Bob Hendricks can help a little bit with this to identify some chapters who might want to do some emailing. And Andrew has looked at, because Andrew comes from academia, so he is taking a look at what we have developed so far. So before we pursue general academia, so for example, like climate academics, ecologists, and folks of that similar vein, I need to get like an order of events pretty laid out before we jump into this big project. So that is to come. But that's the purpose of Grass Tops, and then some 2 specific examples of what type of activities we do to activate that lever.
Thank you, Court. And I wanted to mention for the new folks that are still on the call with us, as we're going through these and talking about these levers, think of a lever as a team, teams of people. That's what a lever is here. As we're going through these and you're hearing the description of what our different teams are, or what our different levers are, make a note of who the contact person is. For example, Court here for Grass Tops, and feel free to reach out directly to the leaders of these different teams. We really need help from new volunteers, and so this is your opportunity to learn what we're doing and to really get involved. Okay, I'm going to move on. Mark for Grassroots.
All right. Yes, so we have a small grassroots team, and we focus on 2 main areas. One is looking for opportunities in the wider community to do a presentation about basics of climate change, and most importantly, what we can do about it, how we can take action to mitigate the effects of that. So I know not too long ago, that gets into tabling, but in presentations, we may have an opportunity with the Sierra Club. I'm in the process of trying to firm up what would work for them. And then our second main direction is looking for opportunities to do tabling, and that's more one-on-one outreach where we'll set up a table in a event going on, such as at a fair, farmer's market, church bazaar. And so those are more one-on-one people stopping by, and that way we can converse with them, find out what their interest is in doing something about climate change. And that's where we get people to sign up for more information about Citizens Climate Lobby. And that way we can invite them to our meetings and also invite them to get involved in what we're doing.
Thank you,
I
Mark.
believe that's
Okay, anything else, Mark?
it.
All right, I'm going to move on. And now the media team, which I'm the leader of, Joe Garfunkel. Some of the work that I'm directly involved in is putting out our monthly newsletters. We just sent out our most recent monthly newsletter this past Monday. Everyone should have gotten that. If you haven't seen it in your inbox, please look in your junk folder. And I have the links there for the most current one as well as the previous one. We're also very active on social media, Twitter and Facebook specifically. And we're also involved in print media. When we have the opportunity, we like to send in letters to the editor, specifically to the Houston Chronicle, for articles that are related to climate change, where we can contribute our own opinions and our feedback on what we would like to see. On the next few slides, I always like to share some recent activity from social media, things that are relevant to Houston or relevant to Texas and so on. And so I'll go through a couple of these slides. The very first one on the left was interesting. It was an article from the Texas Tribune about all of the pollution that's occurring from abandoned oil wells, oil or natural gas wells. So you can see there in the quote, abandoned dry hole oil wells are polluting Texas farms, ranchers, and groundwater. That's a quote from the news article. The cost of fossil fuel pollution is not included in the price of gas, but we all pay the price. There's a lot of work to be done to clean that up. And I wanted to mention, related to that topic, that Lizzie Fletcher in Congress was instrumental in introducing a bill earlier this year to provide money to help clean up abandoned oil wells. So that was very interesting. On the right, in terms of solar, this was in regard to the recent Hurricane Ian that hit Florida. And this was a very interesting article. It says here, this 100% solar community endured Hurricane Ian with no loss of power and minimal damage. The quote from the article said that we have water, electricity, internet, and we may be the only people in Southwest Florida who are that fortunate. So more pluses and positive feedback from solar energy. A couple more items here on the left. It's talking about the EPA's plans for Texas. The EPA will center their climate change response in Texas on sea level rise, floods, drought, and severe storms. Climate change brings with it more intense rainfall, heat, drought, and flooding. We all know that from our work here with Citizens Climate Lobby, and so that's where the EPA is planning to get involved. On the right side there, future of low carbon transportation. Chevron and Texaco fuel stations will get free wire fast chargers for electric cars. So even the these stubborn fossil fuel companies are starting to slowly come around, and that's good to see. A couple more here on the left. Another win for the environment. Texas will build more than 50 new electric car charging locations along major highways. Hans, you had brought this up. We were talking about this earlier in our discussion about the IRA bill. Texas will use up to $408 million from the bipartisan infrastructure law signed last year. Well, this is actually the infrastructure law, not the IRA. But it's interesting that they are going to spend that money, and that's a huge amount of money for infrastructure. So that's good to see. On the right, again, another future of low carbon transportation. Harley-Davidson to reopen Del Mar electric motorcycle reservations after first round was sold out. So there we go with that. More solar on the left. It's official. Solar is now the cheapest electricity in history, confirms the IEA, cheaper than coal and gas in most major countries. On the right here, this was our Get Out the Vote Twitter tweet and Facebook posting. few more here. People don't really talk about climate change. Here's how to start. Although a majority of Americans say they're concerned about climate change, many aren't really talking to their close friends and family about it. And as Professor Dr. Catherine Hayhoe says, communication is one of the most critical things. Oftentimes we don't know what other people are thinking, even people in our families, friends, whatever. And many, many people are aware of climate change and are very concerned about it, but we don't know because we're not talking about it. And therefore, sometimes we think we're kind of an isolated group of people, but more and more people are aware of climate change and are very worried about it. On the right, how Hurricane Ian became so powerful. Scientists say that while climate change has not necessarily increased the number of hurricanes, it made them more powerful as warmer water strengthens and sustains storms. I think this is my last page. On the left there, some good climate news from last week. The Senate approved the Kigali Treaty with bipartisan support, setting a timeline for phase out of greenhouse gases called hydrofluorocarbons. Again, anytime we can get support from the left and the right for bipartisanship, it's amazing. And this was another good thing that happened in the Senate. And on the right there, criticism intensifies after Big Oil admits gaslighting public over green aims. The new documents are the latest evidence that oil giants keep lying about their commitments to help solve the climate crisis, and that's not good. So that's what I had. Anyone interested in media, please get a hold of me. And Dory, chapter development.
Okay, so welcome the new people to our chapter, and that's what we do in the chapter development. I would love any volunteers that want to help me. We call and email new members, encourage them to join our Slack channel, and then find a lever group or two that make you comfortable and participate. It's an easy way to volunteer from your home. So let me know if you are interested. And I think I was talking, we have two artists on the call, maybe still. And I think I mentioned to Destiny the quilt that we made one time. And so this picture just makes me happy whenever I see that. It's like, okay, we all came together, we stitched, we created things, and all right. I think that's all I have. Oh, wait a minute, is there another slide about our meet and greets? Because
We have two more.
all,
We have two more slides. Are we ready?
yeah, go ahead. We're not, as Court was saying, we're not all work. We like to get out and touch the earth as well. Thank you. And so once a month we try and meet together. And this month we're going to meet Saturday, the 19th at 9 a.m. at the Memorial Park Picnic Loop, which is we're going to meet at the Cullen Running Trails Center. So the address is there, and we should have changed. I'm sorry we didn't upgrade this slide because we'll pass it along, but it'll be Mark and I will be your leads for this meet and greet.
Are we running?
No, we're not running. We're walking. We're walking on some trails though, so good walking shoes, and we're going to get out into the woods, which is what makes me happy. And the next slide is about trees, right?
Yeah, so
Yeah, go ahead, Court.
okay. So this is through the Houston Wilderness Organization. So it's not, CCL is not organizing this, but for our second meet and greet, if you are interested in getting out and giving back, this is a tree planting, again, organized by Houston Wilderness. So you can sign up by following that web link or scanning that QR code. If you miss any of those, again, hopefully you've been able to grab the slide deck or just go to Houston Wilderness's website. And it's out like on the east side. Their initiative is to plant trees along the Houston Ship Channel. And so this is Saturday, December 3rd from 9 until 12. And I will be able to go until 11. And so I'll be wearing something CCL if
if it's not too chilly, you'll be able to see the big CCL logo on my t-shirt. And I hope to see y'all guys out there.
Court, what I read about these trees, I went to their website, and it's very interesting. Different types of trees can absorb different amounts of carbon. And so these are actually what they describe as super trees that absorb a tremendous amount of carbon. Maybe you can share more about that if you're aware of that. Okay, maybe not. I'll go on to the next slide. No time for our lever breakout sessions. Usually we do break out into small groups. And our Planet Earth thanks you. So we always like to take a group photo before people leave. And if everybody can turn on their cameras, and we'll take a nice group photo with everybody smiling.
I don't know what we could try and do something. Let me turn it.
I'm not sure if Court can turn her camera on or not. Okay, 1, 2, 3. And let me just verify that it came out okay. Oop, it did not. Let me, I pressed the wrong button. Yeah, okay, let me try that one more time, and this time I'll get it right, I promise. 1, 2, 3. Okay, perfect. This time it worked. Thank you so much, everybody. And we're at the end of our time. I don't want to delay you with whatever else you have planned. Thank you so much for joining, and we'll see each other again next month, if not sooner. Have a great weekend.
Thanks to Joe for a great meeting.
Thank you.
Be safe.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.